Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for the invitation to come and talk today. Just a couple of things to say. I'm actually in Birmingham, and I live in Bourneville. And of course, Bourneville, for those of you that don't know, is the home of chocolate. It's the home of Cadbury's. So I live across the road from the Cadbury's factory, which I think is a bit of an irony, in fact, given that I'm going to be talking about snacks today. So yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about some work that we're doing around physical activity equivalent labelling, and that's effectively an approach where we label food and give the public information about the amount of activity that would be required to burn the calories in food. So I'm going to just sort of talk a little bit about that programme of work and give some examples of different types of foods and how much physical activity would be required to burn those off. So just to sort of set the scene a little bit, there is a little bit of a myth about overweight and obesity, and lots of people, including the media, put out this idea that obesity and overweight is caused by excessive gluttony, and it's not the case. In actual fact, if we all just did a little bit more physical activity and we actually reduced the number of calories that we consumed each day, that would make quite a big difference on a population level in terms of obesity. So it's not the case that you have to make really big changes to your lifestyle. Just a little bit less in terms of calories and a little bit more in terms of physical activity would make a difference. And so I'm going to start with the idea that it's the small things that matter. And of course, we're talking about snacks, which tend to be quite small. And it is snacks, if you like, that can make a big difference and add up in terms of the amount of calories that we eat each day. So my proposition, if you like, is, can PACE food labelling make a difference? Can it nudge the public into making good, healthy decisions when they go to the restaurants, when they go shopping, when they go to takeaways, and just try and get the public to eat a little bit less and do a little bit more physical activity as a result of seeing this type of labelling? And you can see in the chocolate bar, it tells you, for example, how many calories, so 229 calories, and then next to it, it would tell you how much walking or running you would need to do if you wanted to consume the chocolate bar.
You need to get your slide up. It's this into your PowerPoint, Amanda.
So that again, sorry.
Your slide's not been shared. We've given access to you, but you just need to allow it to share now. Get it onto the screen.
Ah, okay. Sorry, I thought I'd shared it.
So if you...
Yeah, when I press share, it doesn't... but I've just sent you the slides. Can you share from your end?
Okay, yeah.
And see if that works.
1 second.
Yeah. It never goes smoothly, does it? Trying to share, but it's not letting. Oh.
Yep. Now we've got it.
Is it working now?
Yes. Yes, we've got it.
We got it. Okay. So I'll keep going. I appreciate. So this was the very first slide when I was talking about the small things that matter, and it's a little nudge towards doing a little bit more physical activity. And the question is, can PACE labelling help with that process? And you can see the milk chocolate bar there, which shows you 229 calories in the chocolate bar, and then it shows you next to it how much physical activity you would need to do in terms of running and walking. And the chocolate bar, I guess, shows the basic premise of PACE labelling and snacks. So this is the current approach that we certainly have in the UK and many other countries around how we label food. And a lot of the public say that they find this type of labelling very difficult to understand. I mean, I think you would need a PhD in mathematics to actually work out whether these foods are good for you or not. So if we look at the pizza, you know, is that a good healthy pizza or is that a bad healthy pizza? I don't know. But clearly it's quite complicated. So we're interested in really making this information accessible to the public. So when they're making choices about what to eat, it's really simple and really easy for them to do so. In contrast, this is paste labeling. So we've got a variety of foods here. And again, it shows you what the alternative approach might be. And the idea being, when you're faced with these foods, you can easily decide whether the calories are worth the amount of activity that would be required to burn off the calories in these foods. So here are some very, very tasty foods. So we've got a samosa, a latte, and a blueberry muffin. So if I told you that that samosa has around 290 calories, and that would take you 60 minutes of walking, you might think again about whether that samosa is actually worth the calories in it. And if we move along, we look at the latte. The latte is around 350 calories, and that's for a medium. Again, if I told you that's about 70 minutes of walking, you might think again. And then the blueberry muffin is about 450 calories. That's about 90 minutes of walking. That's a lot of walking for the blueberry muffin. So it's about getting the public to think about whether these extra things, these extra in their lives, are actually worth it in terms of the foods that they eat. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but there are some pros and cons to paste labeling, and I think it's important to express a balanced view of some of those. We know for sure that the public underestimate the amount of calories that are in food. And we know that it's important to have good energy balance. So to think about the number of calories that you eat relative to the amount of activity that you do. And we think paste labeling is a way of actually encouraging both of those things simultaneously. So when you see the paste labeling, you're weighing up those two things, the calories in and the calories out. The other thing that we know is that children struggle to understand current types of labeling. Again, if you think back to the label that I showed you earlier, lots of complex information. So there's lots of good things, if you like, around paste labeling. The disadvantages are that we don't know which activity type to use. So I've talked about running and walking. Maybe it should be swimming, cycling, dancing. We're not really sure which works best. We're also concerned that actually over time the public will just stop looking at the labels. People just won't engage with the labels, and that's something that we need to look at. We think food companies are likely to resist this change in food labelling. So I've just said to you that I live a couple of minutes away from Cadbury's. I doubt very much I'm Cadbury's favourite person, because they don't want to change the way in which food is packaged, and they don't want to reformulate. But that potentially is one way that this could go. And then the last thing is eating disorders. There has been a lot of concern that this approach to labelling food will lead to eating disorders, but actually there's no evidence that that is likely to be the case. So just to finish up with, I'm going to quickly talk about some research that we've done. So we found that actually when you put paste labelling in place, it actually reduces the number of calories that the public select to consume by 65 calories per occasion. So if you think that we typically eat 3 meals a day, that calculates out to around 200 calories per day, and that doesn't include snacks. If you add snacks on top of that, you can easily look at that figure being sort of 300 to 350 calories per day. And if we kind of calculate that up, that's around 1 kilo per month, which doesn't sound very much, but if you think about that over a period of time, remember going back to my first point about it's the small things that matter, over time that actually would be a considerable amount of weight. So in terms of what we're doing next, so we are focused on this small effect, trying to make the public make small changes to the way in which they live their lives. We think that that's easier for the public to implement in their lives rather than asking people to make big wholesale changes. We do need more studies to look at this in real life scenarios and situations such as restaurants and supermarkets. In terms of what we're doing, with place labelling. So we've got 3 streams of work. One is in young people, because we think that potentially this is an easy way to help young people understand the foods that they buy, and they do tend to buy foods higher in calories. Vending machines, typically there's no healthy foods in vending machines, it's generally just snacking type foods. So we're quite interested in snacking foods as well. And the other area we're doing some work in is on social media, because we think that potentially that's a good place to to disseminate this type of work. So that's sort of me, really. I'm happy to take some questions. You can see the very nice donuts on the right hand side. But you can see it's also going to take 50 minutes of walking if you decide to eat the donut. So I'll leave you to decide whether the donut is worth the effort, but I'm happy to take some questions.